The emergency alarm screamed through the vast halls of the Galactic Council building on Nexus Prime. The sound made everyone stop what they were doing. Something terrible was happening somewhere in the galaxy. Counselor Thexera rushed to her communication station, her 8 tentacles moving quickly across the controls. She was one of the best signal readers in the galaxy, but what she saw on her screen made her blood run cold. The message was coming from the Kepler 442 system, and it was not good news. Her voice shook as she spoke to the other council members. The Zephyrians need our help right now. The Void Reapers have broken through their defenses. The room went completely quiet. You could hear a pin drop. Every alien in that chamber knew what the Void Reapers were. They were living nightmares that traveled from star to star, eating entire planets and everyone on them. These creatures were not just dangerous, they were the stuff of horror stories that parents told their children to keep them from wandering too far from home. The Zephyrians were known throughout the galaxy as peaceful people. They built beautiful cities made of crystal that sparkled like diamonds in their sun's light. Their technology was amazing, but they had never built weapons. They never needed to. Their world was safe and quiet, and they spent their time growing incredible plants and creating art that could make you cry just by looking at it. Admiral Vorth, a big insect-like creature with sharp claws, started clicking his jaw parts together. This was something he did when he was very nervous. Our closest military ships are 6 cycles away from their system, he said. That means it will take them almost a week to get there. Everyone knew what that meant. In a week, there would be nothing left of the Zevarian civilization. The Void Reapers would have eaten their planet and moved on to find their next meal. Millions of innocent people would be dead. The council members looked at each other with hopeless expressions. Their great galactic government, with all its power and technology, could not move fast enough to save these people. It was one of those moments when you realize that sometimes being big and organized is not enough. Then Counselor Yuldash, a small blue creature with large eyes, spoke up quietly. What about asking the humans for help? You know, those Deathworlders from the Sol 3 system? The silence that followed was different this time. It was not the silence of fear, but the silence of people thinking about something they did not want to think about. Everyone had heard the stories about humans, and frankly, most of them were terrifying. Humans came from a planet called Earth, which was so dangerous that most alien visitors died within hours of landing there. The weather could kill you, the animals could kill you, even some of the plants were deadly. Humans had to fight for survival every single day of their lives, just to stay alive on their own world. This constant fighting had made them into something that scared even the toughest warrior species in the galaxy. They did not just fight to win, they fought like wild animals, protecting their young. They used tactics that seemed crazy to other species, and they never gave up. Even when they should have known they were beaten. The worst part was that humans seemed to actually enjoy fighting. Other species fought when they had to, but humans had turned warfare into an art form. They studied it, practiced it, and got better at it all the time. Some aliens whispered that humans were not really evolved enough to be part of galactic civilization, but right now, with the Void Reapers closing in on the helpless Zephyrians, those scary human qualities might be exactly what was needed. Sometimes you need monsters to fight monsters. Counselor Thexera looked around the room at all the worried faces, staring back at her. She knew they were all thinking the same thing. The humans were their only hope, even if the idea of asking for their help made everyone uncomfortable. Send the message to Earth, she said with a heavy heart. They are our only choice. Admiral Li Haiyan-Wu stared at the floating blue hologram in front of him. The image showed the Kepler 442 star system, but it looked nothing like the peaceful place it used to be. Red dots marked enemy positions, and they were everywhere. 12 massive ships, each one the size of Earth's moon, surrounded the Zephyrian home planet like hungry wolves, circling their prey. The war room buzzed with activity. as human officers ran back and forth, checking data and preparing battle plans. Their movements were quick and sure, like a well-practiced dance. These people had been preparing for war their entire lives, and it showed in every action they took. Standing quietly in the corner was Siltara, the Zephyrian diplomat who had brought the desperate message from her people. She was beautiful in an alien way, with smooth skin that glowed softly with different colors depending on her emotions. Right now, those colors were flashing rapidly between blue and purple, which meant she was very scared and worried. Hyan-Wu turned away from the hologram and looked directly at her. His face was serious and his voice was cold as ice. Your people have exactly 72 hours before their planet dies completely. My computers showed 12 Void Reaper bioships attacking your world. Each one of those ships is as big as our moon. Siltara's skin flickered with brighter colors as the fear hit her. In her culture, important decisions took weeks or even months of careful discussion. Every choice was talked about by many people, and everyone had to agree before anything happened. The idea of making such a huge decision quickly seemed impossible to her. But surely you need time to think about this, she said, her voice shaking slightly. Don't you need to talk to your leaders, have meetings, make plans? Captain Park So-young was standing nearby, checking reports on her tablet. She was the commander of the carrier ship called Defiance, and she was known for speaking her mind. When she heard Siltara's question, she let out a short, harsh laugh that had no humor in it. Think about it, have meetings. So-young shook her head. Lady, there are people out there dying right now while we stand here talking. What happened next amazed Siltara so much that she would remember it for the rest of her life. Within just 2 hours, the entire 7th Expeditionary Fleet was ready to launch from Earth's space stations. 18 powerful warships prepared for battle, with the massive dreadnought Retribution leading the way under Commander Kim Minho's command. Siltara watched through the station windows as the human fleet powered up their engines. She had never seen anything like it. While her people would still be having their first meeting to discuss maybe thinking about possibly helping someone, the humans were already flying through space to fight an enemy they had never seen before. The alien observers who had come with Siltara just stood there with their mouths open. In their experience, mobilizing a fleet took weeks of preparation. Supply lines had to be organized, permissions had to be granted, and endless paperwork had to be filled out. But humans seemed to work differently. They saw a problem, made a decision, and acted on it immediately. As the fleet entered hyperspace, the stars outside the windows stretched into long lines of light. Siltara found herself sitting next to Admiral Hyan-Wu in the command center of his flagship. She had been thinking about what she had witnessed, and she needed to understand something that made no sense to her. Why are you doing this? She asked him quietly. Why are you willing to risk everything for people you don't even know? Our species have barely met each other. We are strangers to you. Hyan-Wu's face became even more serious, and his eyes grew hard like steel. He stared out at the swirling colors of hyperspace for a long moment before answering. When he spoke, his words were simple, but they carried the weight of his entire species behind them. Because if we don't help you, who else will? He said. We know what it's like to face extinction. We know what it feels like when no one comes to help you. We decided a long time ago that we would never let that happen to anyone else if we could prevent it. The human fleet rocketed through hyperspace faster than any sane person should attempt. The space around them twisted and bent in ways that hurt to look at. Most alien species would never dare to travel at these speeds because the forces involved would turn their bodies into liquid soup. But humans were different. They had grown up on a world that tried to kill them every day, and their bodies were built to handle punishment that would destroy other creatures. Commander Kim Minho stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching the readings on his screens with growing concern. The ship was shaking so hard that his coffee cup had fallen off his desk and shattered on the floor. Around him, His crew worked at their stations while being thrown around like toys in a washing machine. "Sir, our hull is taking serious damage," called out Lieutenant Choi Do-hai from her position at the engineering controls. Her voice was tight with worry as she watched the numbers on her screen get worse and worse. "We're down to 60% structural strength and it's still dropping." Minho gripped his chair as another violent shake ran through the ship. He knew they were pushing their vessels beyond safe limits, but they had no choice. Every second they spent in hyperspace was another second that innocent people were dying on Zephyria. The math was simple and brutal. Either they arrived in time to help, or they arrived to find nothing but empty space where a planet used to be. "Keep us on course," he ordered, his voice calm despite the chaos around him. "Don't slow down." The Retribution groaned and creaked like an old building in a hurricane. Metal beams bent under the stress, and warning lights flashed red all over the ship. It felt like the vessel was being torn apart by invisible hands, and in a way, it was. They were traveling so fast through hyperspace that reality itself was fighting back against their passage. Siltara was strapped into a special chair designed for beings who could survive incredible forces. Even with all the safety equipment, she felt like a giant was sitting on her chest, making it hard to breathe. She watched the human crew in amazement as they continued working normally under conditions that should have knocked them unconscious. These humans moved and acted like the crushing pressure was nothing more than a mild inconvenience. They had been born and raised on a planet with gravity stronger than most worlds, and an atmosphere that would poison other species. Surrounded by weather that could kill without warning. This journey through hyperspace was just another day at the office for them. "Coming out of hyperspace in 30 seconds, announced Navigator O. Jamin. His hands moved quickly over his controls, preparing the ship for what they would find on the other side. When the fleet finally dropped back into normal space, what they saw was worse than anyone had imagined. The Kepler 442 system looked like a war zone from the worst nightmares. Massive bioships, each one as big as a small moon, were slowly eating the outer planets piece by piece. These were the Void Reapers, and they were even more terrifying in person than in the stories. The creatures' ships were not made of metal and technology like human vessels. Instead, they were alive, with hulls that looked like giant insect shells that pulsed and moved like they were breathing. Smaller fighter craft swarmed around them like angry bees, so many that they blocked out the light from the system's stars. The beautiful crystal planet that had once sparkled like a jewel was now surrounded by a dark cloud of enemy ships. Its protective shields flickered weakly, like a candle flame in a strong wind. It was clear that the planet would not last much longer. Someone on the bridge whispered a curse under their breath as they took in the horrible scene. The situation looked hopeless. 18 human ships against 12 massive bioships and thousands of fighters seemed like a joke, but Commander Minho's voice cut through the shock and fear like a sharp knife. His words were calm and determined, carrying the confidence of a man who had faced impossible odds before and won. "All ships, prepare for battle," he announced over the communication system. "We've got work to do." Admiral Hyenwu stared at the battle display screen, his mind working quickly to understand what they were facing. The human fleet had taken position behind Zephyr's weakening energy shields, using them as temporary cover while they studied their enemies. What he saw made his blood run cold, but also filled him with a strange kind of respect. The Void Reapers were not just scary. They were beautiful in the most terrifying way possible. Their ships were alive, like giant space creatures that had grown instead of being built. The hulls moved and shifted like breathing skin, and when human weapons hit them, the damage slowly healed itself. It was like shooting at something that could not be killed. "Sir, I've been studying their design," said Intelligence Officer Yoon Sajin, her fingers dancing over her computer controls. "The biomass is thickest around what look like nerve centers, but these things have backup nervous systems all through their bodies. If we blow up one control center, another one just takes over. This was the problem with fighting living enemies instead of machines. When you damaged a regular spaceship, it stayed damaged. But these creatures could heal, adapt, and learn from every attack. They were like fighting an opponent who got smarter every time you hit them. Captain Park So-young was not waiting around for more analysis. Her carrier ship Defiance had already launched its fighter squadrons, and now dozens of small human craft were racing toward the massive bio. The fighters looked tiny next to their enemies, like mosquitoes attacking elephants. But they moved with incredible skill and speed. The human pilots had learned to fly in Earth's thick atmosphere, where one mistake meant crashing into the ground and dying. This training made them better than any other pilots in the galaxy. They twisted and turned between the bioship's weapons, moving so fast and unpredictably that the alien creatures could not track them properly. Admiral Hyan-woo watched the enemy formations carefully, looking for patterns and weaknesses. After a few minutes, he noticed something interesting. The Void Reapers were not attacking with full force. Instead, they seemed to be watching the humans, learning how they fought. "They're testing us," he said to his officers. "These creatures have probably fought thousands of different species over the years. They're trying to figure out our tactics so they can counter them." This was both good and bad news. It meant the Reapers were not immediately trying to destroy the human fleet, which gave them time to plan. But it also meant they were dealing with enemies that were smart enough to study their opponents before committing to a full attack. Suddenly, Commander Kim Min-ho's voice came through the communication system, filled with urgency. "Admiral, my sensors are picking up massive energy readings from the lead bioship. Whatever they're charging up, it's big enough to crack a planet in half." Hyan-woo's tactical display showed the largest Void Reaper vessel, a monstrous thing that dwarfed even their biggest dreadnought. Energy was building up inside it like a volcano about to explode. There was no doubt about what it was planning to do. It was going to fire on Zephyria and finish what the swarm had started. The shields around the planet were already failing. If that massive bioship fired its main weapon, millions of innocent people would die in seconds. There was no time for clever tactics or careful planning. Sometimes, the only way to win was to charge straight into hell and hope you came out the other side. "All ships, change course to intercept," Hyan-woo ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos on the bridge. "We're going in. End this now." The human fleet suddenly changed direction, turning away from the relative safety behind the planetary shields. Like ancient warriors charging into battle with spears and shields, they raced directly toward the swarm of alien nightmares. Their ancestors had once hunted creatures many times their size with nothing but sharp sticks and courage. Now their descendants were doing the same thing among the stars. Sergeant Kang Dong-haen moved quickly through the beautiful crystal hallways of the Zephyrian evacuation center, his heavy boots making loud echoes that bounced off the glowing walls. Behind him, his squad of Marines followed in their powered armor suits, looking like walking tanks as they thundered through the peaceful building. The Zephyrian civilians pressed themselves against the walls as the humans passed by. Their skin flickered with rapid pulses of light, bright yellows and oranges that showed how terrified they were. These gentle people had never seen warriors before, and the sight of armed humans in battle gear was completely alien to them. Dong-Hyan stopped in front of a group of Zephyrian families who were huddled together near one of the evacuation points. Adults held their children close while elderly members of their species stood nearby, their skin glowing with confusion and fear. He knew he had to make them understand something that went against everything they believed in. "Listen to me carefully," he said, his voice firm but not unkind. "When those Void Reaper creatures break through our defenses, you need to run away as fast as you can. Don't try to be brave. Don't try to protect your belongings. Just run and keep running until you're safe." The idea of running away from danger was completely foreign to the Zephyrians. Their entire civilization was built on the idea that problems should be faced together, discussed calmly, and solved through cooperation. They had never learned that sometimes the smart thing to do is to get out of the way and let someone else handle the fighting. An elderly Zephyrian stepped forward, his skin pulsing with distressed purple colors. "But Sergeant, what about our sacred groves? What about the ancestral crystals that have been growing for thousands of years? These are the most important things in our culture. We cannot just abandon them." Before Dong Hyun could answer, Corporal Jung Yoon-ji stepped up beside him. Her armor was scarred from previous battles, and her voice carried the hard edge of someone who had seen too much death. "Those crystals and trees will grow back eventually," she said bluntly, "but if you die trying to protect them, you won't come back. Your families need you alive more than they need any crystal." High above them, in the darkness of space, the human fleet was showing the galaxy something it had never seen before. The ships moved together like a pack of wolves hunting a large animal. This was not random fighting. It was a carefully coordinated attack that had been perfected over millions of years of evolution. The lead human ships charged straight at the largest Void Reaper bioships, drawing their attention and firepower, while the alien creatures focused on these obvious threats. Other human vessels moved around to attack from the sides and behind. They worked together like dancers in a deadly ballet, each ship knowing exactly what the others would do without needing to talk about it. Captain Park So-young's fighter squadrons darted between the massive bioships like schools of fish, avoiding sharks. They struck at weak points, damaged important systems, and then disappeared before the enemies could respond. When one group of fighters retreated to reload their weapons, another group immediately took their place. The Void Reapers had never faced enemies who fought like this. Most species they encountered either ran away in terror or fought back with simple, predictable tactics. But humans had learned their fighting skills from the most dangerous predators on Earth. Creatures that hunted in coordinated groups and never gave up once they smelled blood. Commander Kim Min-ho's dreadnought Retribution worked with two smaller destroyers to surround one of the bioships, while his big guns kept the creature busy from the front. The destroyers attacked its flanks, cutting deep wounds in its living hull. When the bioship tried to heal itself, the third ship would strike somewhere else, keeping it from recovering. The Zephyrians watching from their planet's surface were amazed and horrified at the same time. They had always thought of war as something chaotic and senseless, but the humans had turned it into an art form. Every move had a purpose, every attack was part of a larger plan, and every ship knew its role in the greater strategy. These humans fought like their ancestors had once hunted mammoth and saber-toothed tigers, with patience, intelligence, and the absolute determination to bring down prey much larger than themselves. Commander Kim Min-ho watched through his bridge windows as his massive dreadnought Retribution crashed directly into the side of the largest Void Reaper bioship. The impact was incredible, like watching a speeding train hit a mountain. The ship's armored front end tore through the creature's living hull, ripping apart flesh and bone that had been hardened by millions of years of evolution. The bioship was not just a vessel. It was a living creature the size of a city. As the Retribution punched through its side, the wound began trying to heal itself immediately. Living tissue grew and stretched, attempting to seal around the human ship like skin, closing over a splinter. But the dreadnought was too big and moving too fast to be trapped that easily. Alarms began screaming throughout the Retribution as the creature fought back. The bioship's body released streams of acid that ate away at the hull like liquid fire. Emergency lights flashed red as the ship's computer systems registered damage all over the vessel. "Sir, we have major hull damage on decks 7 through 12. Lieutenant Choi Da-hai called out from her station, her voice tight with worry. "The creature is releasing digestive acids. It's literally trying to eat our ship." Min-ho gripped his command chair as the ship shook violently. He had expected this. The bioships were not just weapons, they were predators. They were designed to capture and consume their prey, breaking it down into nutrients that could be absorbed and used. "Seal all the emergency barriers," he ordered. "Get the Marine teams ready for boarding action. We're going inside this thing." High above them, the space battle continued with deadly intensity. Fighter pilot Lee Soo-jin pushed her small craft to its absolute limits as she dove straight toward one of the bioship's weapon ports. The creature was preparing to launch a cloud of spores that would eat through metal and flesh alike. But she was not going to let that happen. Her engines screamed as she overloaded them, pushing far beyond safe power levels. She knew this attack would probably destroy her fighter, but that did not matter. What mattered was stopping the weapon before it could kill her friends. Her craft punched through the creature's neural control center in a brilliant explosion of fire and alien blood. Her wingman, Kim Tae-young, followed her through the blast without hesitation. His own weapons fired continuously as he carved deep wounds in the bioship's flesh, preventing it from healing the damage Soo-jin had caused. Together, they had crippled one of the creature's most dangerous weapons. This was something the Void Reapers had never seen before. Most species they fought were careful and cautious, trying to preserve their own lives above all else. But these humans seemed willing to throw themselves into certain death if it meant completing their mission. It was not stupidity that drove them, it was a cold calculation that sometimes the only way to win was to accept terrible losses. Deep inside the bioship, Sergeant Dong Hyan led his Marines through corridors that looked like the inside of a living body. The walls pulsed with a rhythm like a giant heartbeat, and the air was thick with toxic gases that would have killed unprotected humans in seconds. Their armor's air filters worked overtime to keep the poison out. The corridor walls were not passive barriers. They were part of the creature's defense system. As the Marines moved forward, the walls sprouted long tentacles that tried to grab them, and jets of acid sprayed from hidden openings. It was like fighting while walking through the digestive system of a monster. "This is insane," gasped Corporal Jung Yoongji, as her armor's warning systems alerted her to the dangerous chemicals in the air. "It's like we're fighting while trapped inside a giant stomach." Dong Hyun planted another explosive charge on what looked like a major nerve bundle, his movements calm and professional despite the chaos around them. "Then let's give this thing the worst case of indigestion it's ever had," he replied grimly. The Marines pushed deeper into the bioship, leaving a trail of explosions behind them as they destroyed everything that looked important. The massive bioship shuddered and writhed in agony as something terrible happened deep inside its body. Commander Minho had made the hardest decision any military leader could make. He had turned his own ship into a weapon of last resort. The Retribution's nuclear reactor was overloading, building up energy that would soon explode with the force of a small sun. Min-Ho stood on his bridge as alarms screamed around him, watching his crew work calmly at their stations, even though they all knew they were about to die. These men and women could have tried to escape, could have begged him to change his mind, but instead they stayed at their posts and did their jobs. This was what separated humans from most other species. When death was certain, they faced it with dignity. The explosion, when it came, was visible from the planet's surface. The Retribution's reactor went critical deep inside the bioship's core, releasing more energy than most stars produced in a year. The blast tore through the creature's nervous system like lightning, causing waves of pain and confusion to ripple through its massive body and into the minds of all the other Void Reapers. The cost of victory was written in fire across the darkness of space. 7 human ships floated dead in the void, their hulls cracked open like broken eggs. Inside those vessels, thousands of people had died, men and women who would never see Earth again, who had given their lives for strangers they had never met in worlds they had never seen. The communication channels filled with casualty reports as the surviving ships counted their losses. Names and numbers scrolled across screens, each one representing someone's child, parent, or friend who would not be coming home. The price of saving Zephoria had been paid in human blood, and it was a cost that would be felt for generations. Captain Park Soyoung's carrier Defiance was barely holding together. Acid from the bioships had eaten through its flight decks, leaving ugly scars across its hull. The ship limped through space on backup power, its engines sputtering and its weapons systems offline. But Soyoung's remaining fighter pilots still flew protective circles around the wounded vessel, refusing to abandon their duty even though their own ships were damaged and their fuel was running low. The surviving Void Reapers, their coordination broken by the death of their largest bioship, began to retreat into the empty spaces between stars. For the first time in their ancient existence, they had met something more dangerous than themselves. Creatures who were willing to die to protect others. This was a concept they could not understand, and it filled them with something they had never felt before: fear down on Zephyr's surface. Temporary hospitals had been set up in crystal buildings that sparkled like jewels under the alien sun. Siltara moved through the medical facilities, watching human doctors and medics work alongside her own people to save the wounded from both species. She stopped beside one human marine who was lying on a medical bed, his armor removed to reveal terrible injuries. His uniform was soaked with blood, and it was clear he was badly hurt. But when Zephyrian children were brought in, he waved the doctors away from himself. "Help them first," he insisted, pointing at the young aliens with a shaking hand. "I can wait." Siltara knelt beside his bed, her skin glowing with colors that showed her confusion and amazement. "I don't understand," she said softly. "Why did you do this? Why did your people sacrifice so much for us? We barely know each other." The Marine's eyes were growing dim, but he managed to focus on her face. Despite his pain, he smiled, a weak expression that somehow carried the warmth of his entire species. "Someone had to," he whispered, and then closed his eyes. The Void Reapers disappeared into the darkness between galaxies, carrying with them the memory of creatures who had shown them that there were things in the universe more powerful than hunger, love, duty, and the willingness to die for others. 3 days after the battle, Siltara floated through the corridors of the orbital medical station, trying to understand something that seemed impossible to her. The same humans who had fought like savage beasts against the Void Reapers were now showing incredible kindness and gentleness to the wounded. It was like watching wolves turn into caring nurses. She found Corporal Jung Young-ji sitting in the children's ward, her left arm wrapped in a special healing device that would help her damaged bones grow back together. Despite her own pain, Yoon was surrounded by young Zephyrians, teaching them simple human songs. Her voice was soft and melodic as she helped the alien children forget the terrible things they had seen. "Why are you doing this?" Siltara asked, settling down beside them. "You're badly injured yourself." Yoonji smiled and gently stroked the head of a small Zephyrian child whose skin was flickering with nervous colors. "Where I come from, we learned early that life is precious because it's so fragile," she explained. "On Earth, everything is trying to kill you all the time. The weather can freeze you solid or cook you alive. The animals see you as food. Even some of the plants will poison you if you touch them wrong." She paused to help one of the children with the words to a lullaby before continuing. "We didn't learn to fight because we enjoyed violence. We learned to fight because if we didn't, our entire species would have died out thousands of years ago. Fighting was never about hurting others. It was about surviving long enough to protect the people we loved." In another part of the medical station, pilot Kim Tae-young was recovering from radiation poisoning he had received during the battle. His skin was pale, and his hands shook slightly, but he was still talking to visiting Zephyrian officials, trying to help them understand why humans had risked everything for strangers. "The thing about living on a dangerous world," he said, his voice weak but determined, "is that it teaches you what really matters. When you're fighting for your life every day, you learn to value the quiet moments. You learn to appreciate peace, safety, and the chance to help others." He coughed, and a human medic moved closer to check on him, but he waved her away. Fighting taught us something that peaceful species might never learn. It showed us what was worth protecting. When you've seen death up close, when you've lost people you care about, you understand how precious life really is. Later that day, Admiral Hyan-Woo stood before the assembled Zephyrian Council in their crystal chamber. His uniform was burned and torn from the battle, and there were bandages visible under his jacket. The alien leaders looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and fear, still trying to understand the creatures who had saved them. "I know what you're thinking," Hyan-Woo said quietly, his voice carrying easily through the chamber. "You're wondering if we're heroes or monsters. You've seen us fight with a violence that scares you, and now you're trying to figure out if you can trust us." The council members shifted uncomfortably, their skin colors betraying their conflicted emotions. Some glowed with warm colors of gratitude, while others flickered with the cooler hues of uncertainty. "The truth is, we're neither heroes nor monsters," the Admiral continued. "We're just people who grew up in hell, and that experience taught us something important. We learned that sometimes the only way to stop a monster is to be willing to become something just as dangerous." He gestured toward the medical station visible through the chamber's crystal walls, where human and Zephyrian medical staff worked side by side. "But we also learned that the point of fighting isn't to win, it's to protect those who can't protect themselves." The Zephyrians began to understand something profound about their rescuers. Earth had not created a species of killers, it had forged a race of guardians. These humans understood that sometimes violence was the only language that evil could understand, and they were willing to speak that language so others wouldn't have to learn it. 6 months had passed since the battle at Sephoria, and the galaxy was a different place. The Galactic Council had made a decision that would have seemed impossible before the Void Reaper attack. They officially created the Terran Defense Initiative. This meant that human military fleets were now stationed at key points throughout known space, ready to respond to any emergency call for help. It was a remarkable change. Just a year ago, most alien species had been afraid of humans, calling them dangerous Deathworlders who were too violent to be trusted. Now those same species were asking the humans to protect them. Fear had been replaced by respect, and respect had grown into something approaching gratitude. Siltara had been chosen as the Zephyrian ambassador to Earth, a position that would have been unthinkable before the attack. She now spent her time traveling between worlds, helping other species understand the humans who had saved her people. Today, she stood in the Memorial Garden on Luna Station, one of humanity's space stations orbiting their moon. The memorial was beautiful in its simplicity. A wall of polished black stone stretched across the garden, and carved into its surface were 10,000 names, every human who had died, defending Each name represented someone who had traveled across the galaxy to fight for strangers. Someone who would never see their home again. Siltara placed a small crystal flower at the base of the memorial wall. The flower had been grown from seeds, brought from her homeworld, and it glowed softly with the same light that had once illuminated Zephyrian cities before the attack. It was her people's way of saying thank you to those who could no longer hear their words. Admiral Hyan-Woo approached quietly, his footsteps soft on the garden path. He looked older than he had 6 months ago, with new lines around his eyes and gray streaks in his hair. The responsibility of protecting an entire galaxy was not something that sat lightly on anyone's shoulders. "The other council members keep asking me to explain your people to them," Siltara said without turning around. "They want to understand how humans work, what makes you different from other species. How do I tell them that your greatest weapon isn't your advanced ships or your skilled soldiers, but your willingness to use them for people you've never met?" Hyan-Woo stood beside her, looking out over the station's observation deck, where children from dozens of different species played together in the artificial gardens. Human kids chased Zephyrian younglings through the flower beds, their laughter creating a sound that echoed through the corridors like music. "Maybe understanding isn't something you can teach with words," he said thoughtfully. Maybe it's something that has to be experienced. Maybe it's something you just have to trust. The scene before them was proof of how much had changed. Children who had been taught to fear each other were now playing together, learning that differences in appearance didn't matter when it came to friendship. Their parents watched from nearby benches, former enemies who had become allies through shared hardship. Across the galaxy, billions of peaceful beings went to sleep each night, knowing they were safer than they had been before. In the darkness, between stars, human ships patrolled the empty spaces, their crews maintaining a constant watch for threats that might emerge from the void. These were not conquerors seeking to build an empire, but guardians who had taken on the burden of protecting those who could not protect themselves. The humans had answered a question that had echoed through the cosmos for thousands of years. When innocent people cry out for help, who will come to their aid? The answer was written in the memorial walls and spoken in the laughter of children from different worlds playing together. Humanity would come, not because they were forced to, not because they expected rewards or recognition, but because they understood something that few species ever learned, that the strongest people are those who use their strength to protect the weak. The Deathworlders had become the galaxy's guardians, and the universe was safer because of it.